Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hi there, it's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 114 of Cognitive, and we're in a pretty good place here on the farm. We're having a good weekend. It is Monday, January 23rd, 2023, and it's 7:48 p.m. as I record this. A lot of pet pictures in this one if you want to go see them. All the show notes are on our group on Ravelry, but also on our blog page on cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. Your comments are very welcome, and you can leave them in either place. I do want to say, yes, I'm being spammed by robo-accounts right now. It's like this comes in waves, and it's always interesting to see who they're trying to pass it off as. Mostly it's white guys right now, and we've got some confused names that could be one of several groups. And then we've got some babes who look like they're soliciting, so to speak, online. But no, none of you real people. So if you want to talk to me, leave comments, and follow along, basically it's Blogspot or the group on Ravelry. I really do appreciate your comments, which rolls me right into the warm thanks department. Beautiful Christina, or Christa as you are also called. I happen to adore the novels of Georgette Heyer. It's a great recommendation. She basically, as far as I know, really invented Regency romances, and she invented them quite a long time ago. So they're not particularly oversexed or porn-oriented, as I recall them. I read a few of hers. The one I remember is The Grand Sophie, which is just delightful. So if you're into Regency stuff, I really don't like the ones that are oversexed or the love scenes are too graphic. I'm just not that interested. Knit Wish, oh my goodness, Powell's is your local bookstore. Well, I know where you live, and also I'm deeply jealous because I have spent many a happy day just roaming Powell's in Portland. I mean, there's nothing like it for a book nerd. So, do I have to tell you that I ordered that copy of Crafting with Cat Hair? If I were you, I'd be waiting for my next review, because I'm sure when I get it, I'm going to review it. I don't think I'm going to get it for a while. It wasn't really expensive. The shipping cost as much as the book, so now I'm really looking forward to it. Knit 1, Pug 2, hang in there. 2 tweens, hang in there. But also, I'm not sure what I actually was talking about when I said it's just a skill and anyone can learn it. But I'm glad you picked up on that one of the things that keeps people trapped in mental health disorders is the belief that there's some magic they don't possess that the rest of us do possess. And certainly there are organic situations, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, where it is demonstrably about a biological problem and it is going to be fixed mechanically, like by medication. But even those are greatly negotiated by teaching the people experiencing them life skills. And so it really is all just a skill. That most of the time when you're having problems, you just need to hone up your skills. All I can tell you is one step at a time and hang in there. COVID, you know the drill. Get your shots. I've got all the links there that I think are still useful. Trying to tone down the COVID part a little bit because I think we're all there. I mean, I think whatever your stance on COVID is, it's probably pretty much fixed in place. So I'm going to move on to what's on my hooks and needles. Well, it has been a good week here in the finishing land. And part of the reason was I stash tossed. So what does that actually mean? Well, it didn't start out this way. I was looking for one skein of yarn. What happened? Well, I was going through my leftover blues. Remember that my Romule 23 sweater, and yes, for those of you who are confused, Romule's over, but remember you have till March 31st to finish whatever your project was. For those of you in the cold, dark regions who need help to get through the winter, you know who you are. But meanwhile, so I was going through my blue scraps that I didn't use, and I'm saying, okay, what do I do? And as you can see, I used a lot of them to make hats. And that was last week. I did the 2 Romule 23 hats from leftovers and realized that, yeah, part of the goal was to give them to a shelter. So they are in the box to go to the shelter, and I'm very pleased about that. But in the meantime, I found 3 skeins of Cascade Pastazza, I think it's called. It was from, I believe, 2010. And that was odd. I sort of looked at it and said, why did I buy these? Well, they were dedicated to make a vest from the book Fitted Knits, which I'm looking at here on my shelf. And I no longer like the vest. And I said, well, but it's beautiful stuff. I think it's a wool llama blend. And it's really beautiful. It's interesting because it's 4 strands just plied together. One strand is lavender, one strand is a pale blue, one is a deep green, and one is a pale green. And overall, it comes out looking like a dusty, light steel blue color. But it's very beautiful. It's also very dusty. It's been sitting in there for, 12, almost 13 years? I was really shocked when I looked at the date I had stashed it. But anyway, there were 3 of the skeins, and I said, well, that obviously was a vest. And I looked it up in my Ravelry notes, and yeah. And I said, well, to make the vest I want to make, that would be 4 skeins. And I looked in my stash, I had 4 skeins, and yet somehow I'd only found 3. Okay, meanwhile, interlude. Remember my hobby of knitting sort of certain traditional things like Socktober, when I make the Halloween socks with my leftovers in Romule. Well, remember, February is vestuary, when it's the shortest month, so you make the smallest sweater, which is a vest. And I thought, oh, I could use that to make my vest in vestuary. So I had to go back and find skein number 4. Well, anyway, I ended up going through like 6 giant bins of yarn and hand-spun and unspun fiber. And I did find it. And I found other sweaters worths I had bought. And it blew my mind. I would trace this to stitches 2009 and 2010. And I would trace the yarns I bought probably to webs that my guess is I was at Stitches in San Jose. And I went to Webs and I used the discount and bought sweaters worth. I did not record where I bought them from in my entries on Ravelry. But I did stash these in 2009 and 2010, the ones I'm going to talk about. And so I'm thinking, it's really funny because I think in those days I was trying to figure out how much do you need to make a sweater, and I wasn't quite sure. So 1 or 2 of these things I found, I fall about 1 skein or half a skein short. But that's okay, because what you do then is you knit the bottom hem, which I almost always knit using the brick pattern as my template, and I do the bottom in knit 1, purl 1 rib, and I do the cuffs, and I do the collar in that. So obviously you just find a contrast yarn, and that's really going to take up that missing skein, so I'm not worried about that. But I did end up pulling a sweater's worth of, they're both Cascade. One is a one is a medium charcoal gray, and the other is Quattro, I think it was called, and I'm not sure exactly what the definition of that is. Anyway, it's bluish. That's all I can say till I start knitting with it, so you'll see it later. But I was stunned that I had these 2 really perfect sweaters worth that are very old, like a decade old, and I thought I really should pull them out. And I know that charcoal, I was thinking of Harry Potter sweaters. And I'm not sure that I am. I think instead I'm thinking of doing one of Bad Wolf Girl Knits beautiful stranded colorwork sweaters with the gray as the background. I'm thinking they will make terrific, the gray one will make a terrific Halloween sweater background. So I'm very happy. So I did stash toss. And in the stash toss, you will see I pulled out a skein of hand spun, and that became the Twilight Gradient watch cap, and that's finished. And the other one I did was the Pretty Plums hat, which is an old Cascade hand paints from 2009. It's just sensationally beautiful. I wish it wasn't Cascade for a number of reasons, but it's a very old skein, and I can see why I bought it. I couldn't walk by this colorway now without buying it. The other thing was, I started to say this last week about templates, and I really want to say it. One of the ways I would describe myself is as a template knitter. What that means is, for my major patterns, for sweaters, for socks, for vests, for hats, I have to say, for some neckwear like infinity scarves, I look for a template pattern. And I look for a pattern that's pretty bomb-proof, that is not too challenging. And I use that, and I work with it a number of times to fit it to myself, to get it the way I want it, and to learn about it. And I realized with the hats, it's a little more complicated when you do hats. Number one, my template for any hat is a watch cap. I love watch caps. I love having the fabric doubled over my ears. My poor little ears have been cold for the last 62 years, so I love watch caps. So virtually every hat I make is a watch cap. And having said that, you need a watch cap pattern in different size yarns, because a lot of yarns come available for watch caps. So for the bulky watch cap, I was using Lion Brand Yarns watch cap pattern. I don't even know what they call it. Go to lionbrandyarn.com and look at their hat patterns. You'll find it's their basic watch cap. It had a few errors. Like at one point they're knitting it in the round, then at the end it sounds like they're knitting it flat. And it was easy enough to figure out how to knit the whole thing in the round and to realize they tried to merge two patterns and screwed it up a bit. They may have fixed it since. I haven't looked at it in years because now I've got a template in my head for what a watch cap is. The basic watch cap is 4 inches of ribbing that's going to be folded up, and for my head, 5 inches of stockinette, and then you go into the decreases. That's my basic. How you do the decreases depends on your template. So it turns out, for the bulky, I'm using the Lion Brand pattern, and I think I'm casting on 74 stitches on like size 10 and 10 and a half, and 10 for the ribbing, 10 and a half for the body. And then for worsted weight, I had a little struggle with this. I was using Church Mouse Yarn's Boyfriend watch cap pattern. Just doesn't work right on me. I've used it a few times and it looks okay. It just doesn't come out fitting right for me. I think my head's a little big for it. So they have one adult size, so nothing against them. Church Mouse makes some very fine patterns. It just doesn't work for me. So I ended up with the Siemens, S-E-A-M-A-N, Guys at Sea, the Siemens Church Watchcraft, and that works great for me in a worsted weight. When I get down to DK, I'm using Pearl Soho's, I think it's basic DK watch cap, which is a 1x1 rib all the way through. And from bottom to top. And I have realized it's fun, but I'm realizing I want to try that same number of cast on. But after my happy 4 inches of 1x1, I'm going to try on my next DK, just knitting it straight up in a stockinette. That should work just fine. There's no reason that won't work. So again, you even have to have templates inside templates. That if you're using different weight yarns for the same thing, the same article of clothing, you might need different template patterns for different weight yarns. And again, when I do sweaters, I use the Agnes without the pockets for my bulky weight sweaters. I use the brick for my worsted weight. I haven't got a standard yet for DK, but so far it's been the Ducat, which makes a perfectly fine DK, and I really like the unusual ribbing on it. So that's what I want to say about the templates. And so you can see on the hats, I believe both of these, they look like they're 1x1 ribs. I think both of these are the Siemens Church watch cap. I believe when I made the Romules, one of them is the Siemens Church, and the other one is the Church Mouse Yarns. I don't like either one of them because on both of them I used size 7 for the most of it. And really what I found is I think they were using a 6 for the band and a 7 for the more relaxed stockinette. And I use a 7 for the band and an 8 for the stockinette. And then I experimented and realized, no, I use a 7 for the band. Sorry, I use an 8 for the band now and a 9 for the stockinette. And I got really perfectly fitted hats when I did the 2 that are in the notes, the Pretty Plums and the Twilight Gradient. The other happy thing, the Twilight Gradient, was a fairly recent spin. And I just loved it. And I really wanted to put it into a sweater and just realized it ain't never going to work. But I did realize it is a DK and it would make a fine cap. So I have been wearing the heck out of the Pretty Plums, which I just finished like a day ago, and the Twilight Gradient. Both of them are extremely comfortable and well fitted to me. Now, if you look at the picture of the Pretty Plums, you will see that I have a little leather tag. And I have this on all my hats lately. Remember when I think is it Urban Outfitters made a hat, and somebody made a knitted pattern out of it and put it on Ravelry, and I made a few of those. But they started this thing, I think it was Urban Outfitters, where they put this little leather tag with their name on it. And suddenly everybody wanted these little leather tags on their hats. I ignored that until I was up north in Bishop at the yarn store up there that I love, Sierra Cottons and Wools. And they had little tags that said Sierra Made on their counter that you could buy. And I bought 2 of them and said, God, that's cute. So I went on to Etsy, the source of all good. And on Etsy, I went to Birch and Cider, and they are still there. And I bought 10 of the little tabs. And they let you get an amazing amount of writing on these things. You get all different color background for the tab. I chose a color called Rawhide. All different color for the contrast lettering. I think I just used black. And then different colors for the actual little screw that screws the hat in, or screws the tab in. But you don't have to buy the screws with it. You can just buy the tab and sew it on. I do buy the screws. The price is right. The quality is great. I have now bought 10 of them, and I think I've got 9 of them now on hats. So I just went back and I bought, I think, 25 more. And if you're wondering what my tag says, there's a little llama icon, and below it, it says JM, as in just me. And under it, it says Me Facet, which is the Latin from the Middle Ages that means made me. So JM made me. Now, if you want to do it classical Latin, you'd probably say Meum Facet. But in the Middle Ages, they just shortened it, at least I know in Britain. I don't know if this is true in other Western European countries, but it's very common for a crafter to put his name and then Me Facet in the Middle Ages. And so I kind of love that. So that's what my tags say. I do recommend them. The price is very moderate, and I quite like them. So if you want to know, I've had a few people ask me about those tags this week. So that's Cider and, I can't remember if it's Cider and Birch or Birch and Cider on Ravelry. I love Cider and I love Birch, so that name drew me right in. So that's what I wanted to tell you about that. So I have a lot of hats now, which is really, really nice in our hat box, which is right by the front door. And I did a major stash toss. I really do think about once a year you should go in and just look at all your stash, particularly your old stuff. Why? Well, it stopped me from going online and buying another sweater's worth of Malabrigo, which, by the way, I still have several sweaters worth of Malabrigo. No regrets there. But I am deeply enjoying them. In the meantime, I started working and planning my Vestuary 2023 vest. And that was a result of the stash toss. That going back, I realized I knew I had plenty of yarn to make the Vestuary 23. The only question is, did I want to use a yarn that I have a whole sweater's worth, arms included? And again, by stash tossing, I realized I had a vest worth that I had bought years ago, and there's a picture of it. It looks much darker in that picture, but there is the picture of the Pastaza. And you can see it's just a very, very pretty color. It looks like a sort of dark, cold blue, like almost a steel blue, metallic blue in that picture. It actually comes out looking lighter. The picture under it, you can see the first few rows of the bottom of my vest. I do my vests bottom up from Ann Budd's the Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns, and this is where I learned my trick about using a template, that I've always used that same vest pattern. I really like it. It goes well with my entire wardrobe, and I've now really fitted it to myself so every vest I make looks better and better. So as we speak, I am about 6 rows from the end of the ribbing, and I can go into the stockinette. I didn't mean to start this early. I have a lot of other projects, but I really care about vestuary. I really like being dedicated to at least one vest per year, because I do use vests quite a lot, and they're very handy to have around, and they're kind of ubiquitous, that you can stick them on over sweatpants with a turtleneck and look better than you should because you're wearing sweatpants. But you can also stick them over a nice shirt and decent pants for work. I mean, they're really kind of an amazing layer if you make a very classic pattern. I'm thinking about making a turtleneck on this one instead of my traditional V-neck. We'll see what I have left when I get there. But I am deeply enjoying it. If you look closely at that second picture of the ribbing, you will see the colors in the pistazza. Does Cascade even make this stuff anymore? I don't know. Like I said, I've been saying for months, they really took a quality decline in my opinion. So I just don't think Cascade is worth the trouble, but I'm using my old stash back from the days when it was worth something. In the meantime, I haven't done anything on the lane splitter, which I'd really like to get that finished, but I'd really like Santa Claus to come down my chimney tonight, and that won't be happening either for a while. But the don't know yet. Oh, we had a good night and a funny night, because I sat down, I can't think if it was last Thursday night, and I felt so inadequate. I just felt like I couldn't even think. I didn't have the bandwidth to knit or crochet. So I sat down and I seamed, and as a result, let me see, I finished the small seams on row 6. So now row 6 is completely stitched together as a long solid row of 19 blocks. And now I went back to the big chunk of it, the bottom that I have, and I seamed the entire row 5 to the big block. So now I've got a big block that is rows 1 through 5. And they are completed. They are seamed together. The ends are woven in. It looks very nice. And row 6 is now clipped to it as a whole. That means I went into my pictures and I looked up row 7. I hope I'm getting these numbers right. Let me see. I'm looking at the picture. Yeah, it was row 7. And that's when I learned that I did not quite give you all an accurate picture of what the finished project will look like. After I took the big picture of the assembled blocks that were not clipped together, I moved a few around. So I had to be a little clever putting together row 7, I must say. But row 7 is now sitting here on my floor, and it has clips. What had happened was I ran out of clips. And so rows 7 through like 11 were not clipped together. They were just put into project bags. And I took pictures of each row before I bagged it so I would be able to figure out which row was which. I did not drop any kind of label in the bags because I didn't have any loose paper. I really try not to use paper. I really am trying to, again, not make waste. So, I just took a picture. And so row 7 is clipped together. And I am now slowly seaming its blocks together. I've done a few of them already. And when I finish that, I will do the long seam that will join row 6 to the bottom of the blanket, which is currently rows 1 through 5. And then I will clip row 7 in place to be seamed to the long blanket. And if you're paying attention, you'll realize I had all those clips in the blanket. And as I am finishing one row, I generate clips so I can clip together the next row, until I get back to a place where I catch up to the rows like row 12 that actually has clips in it holding it together. Just roll with me. I don't mean to be this complex. But if you look in the show notes, you will see the picture of the planned final blanket. And you will also see me last Thursday or Friday night, I forget which, and I'm holding up the bottom of the blanket, which I believe is 5 rows clipped together. It looks like it's 4, but there's actually a sort of 5th row that's all black, kind of bent around the back there. But there's me sitting there with this great long thing. I cannot tell you how happy this thing makes me. And this still blows my mind how satisfying it is to just do this big blanket out of, yes, 361 blocks. I am, as Shakespeare would say, astonied that I have kept it going this far and that it is coming together. So I am looking forward to the finished blanket. When do I expect to finish it? Don't hold your breath. My guess would be late June at the earliest, would be when I think would be the soonest I will get the whole thing assembled. There is no timeline. It's just when I am in the mood or when I have a minute or two, I will stitch 2 blocks together. And then when I just get the bug, I sit down and I will sew the long seam to attach a row, an assembled row, to the bottom 5 rows of the blanket. So we'll see, but it's exciting to do it. It's just a very pleasant, slow unspiraling of the project. The Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery, the wrapped in tiny chains, the Lady Eleanor. No love this week, but they will get their love. I'm not sure how much energy I'm going to have. I didn't want to start vestuary for another week. By the way, so Facebook gives me my memories today, and you know what the first memory was? A year ago today, I started my Vestuary 22 project early. You have all my favorite resources in there. While I was stash tossing, I did notice I had 2 beautiful skeins of a bulky dark green, and Knit Picks was doing its red, pink, and white sale. And I also need some white and some cream because I'm looking at doing sport weight mittens and some DK weight. And so I went to Knit Picks and I bought a skein of white bulky and I believe a skein of cream or oyster. I think it was cream. No, it was white for the mittens as well. And I'm looking at a bulky sweater that has a stranded top that's very handsome. It's kind of the pattern that's on Charlie Brown in the comic strips on his shirt, on the body of his shirt. It's kind of that moved up to a yoke line. And I realized with my 2 skeins of this beautiful green, a skein of white, really a half skein of white, a half skein of another green, and a half skein of a frosty blue-white would make this beautiful thing. So I thought, oh, that's too much. I don't really want to make 2 bulky green hats. That's too much to pass up, and I want another bulky sweater. So there we go. Okay, I don't have Knit Picks on my list because Knit Picks, they're ubiquitous. I don't like their supplies. I'm not the biggest fan of their yarns, but sometimes when you need a certain color, they're useful and you want it in wool. Dizzy Blondes, nothing really going on there. Still brushing Minerva to get her fuzz balls. When I stash tossed, I found a beautiful thing, a skein of a gorgeous burnt orange, pure silk, lace weight that I got from Redfish Dye Works. It will coordinate beautifully with my own hand-spun lace that I was blending with Minerva, and it also will blend with Minerva if I want it to. I need to look at it. It might be 2-ply, which means I won't blend it with Minerva, but it should certainly go into the shawl that I'm planning to make, the Shetland pattern shawl that I want to make from Minerva's fur. And no, I've not yet unboxed the new Nano. So let's get on to the strategies. We're talking about interpersonal strategies. And this is kind of my interlude. This really isn't DBT. But it is and it isn't. Let's put it that way. It's kind of me riffing a bit. So we're talking about how do you handle conflict? How do you tell people what you want? One of the things that I constantly see forgotten is to keep the bigger picture of where you are in the group or on the team. So, for example, when you're angry at a family member, this is really true in marriage, but I think it's true all throughout the family. And I think when you have a good marriage, you're teaching your kids this by example. You have to keep in front of you, no matter how angry you get at a family member, you're still family. You're still going to come together after this, and you have to leave that possibility available, no matter how angry you're getting at someone, that you're all still in the group, and the group is not supposed to disintegrate. And it's very tragic because sometimes it does. And that's what you see all the time in therapy. You see these people who bitterly attack their group, the people who support them. This falls under Dr. Gemma's rubric of, please remember, treat your friends like your friends. Don't treat your friends like your enemies. And it's very important in the workplace, and it's very important in your friendships. That if you're going to argue with somebody, Only little children argue like, I never want to talk to you again. That's childish. That's immature. Now, we all think that from time to time. Well, I do. But you don't let it come out of your mouth once you're past the age of 9 or 10. Oh, the boys are in the background yelling. So you have to remember that when you're going to go into conflict, or when you're just asking for something, or when you think the person you're about to talk to may not agree with you or may not like what you're saying, you have to start with that bigger perspective. At the end of this discussion, what will my relationship with this person be? And I do worry because it's very popular on all these memes on like Facebook and Instagram and whatnot to say, get those toxic people out of your life. You don't need them. That's true. I mean, when someone is really toxic, yeah, okay. We all have family members that we say, okay, I just can't work with this. They're really harmful. But on the whole, most of the people you know are not to be permanently excluded from your life. And you can't go around acting like that's going to be okay. And that leads to sort of a subset. The subset is, and this is the work of, I can't remember his first name, I can't remember if it's Alfred or Antonio Banderas, a wonderful guy at Stanford, where he talked about your social circles. And he said, one of the important things is to realize that we have circles of relationship. And that is, we're in the center of our own world. And closest to us in the innermost circle are our intimates. So in my world, that would be my husband and my son. Arguably some of my pets. As I record this, Minerva just climbed into my lap and is demanding I brush her and rubbing everything with her head, trying to flirt with me to get me to brush her because she's in love with her brush. But anyway, so I have these intimates, and I fear, since she has 20 claws, saying that she is anything other than in my most intimate circle. And then a little further out, we have the people who we cherish, but they're not quite the closest level. So in my case, that would be some extended family members, some siblings, and a few people like, my girlfriend, Chris, who's been my closest friend since we were both 10 years old. I don't think I even remember life before Chris. And we know each other more intimately than, frankly, I know most of my siblings. And so on and so forth. Like the circles extend outwards. So in the next circle out, you have some nice friends at work or at school that you go over to each other's houses. You might go out for coffee, whatever. Go to Starbucks. And then a little further out, you have your acquaintance circle. And the acquaintance circle, ideally, is pretty large. It's a lot of people you like, but you wouldn't necessarily take them home with you. Further out from that, and by the way, you may have people in your church, people in your synagogue or your temple, people in your neighborhood, where they're more in that acquaintance circle. You say, hi, how you doing? You smile. You wish them well. You know them. If their kid was running down the street with his hair on fire, you'd run out and help them. Okay, most of you would do that anyway. But they're not as close to you as your loved ones, your intimate ones, and so on. So the circles expand outward, getting farther and farther away. And so, there's those people you wave to when you walk down the street. You're not quite sure who they are, but you recognize them. There's the occasional person at your workplace or your church, whatever, your synagogue, your temple, and so on. Okay, so you need to keep that in mind, because one of the things I rarely see portrayed in the public media is these circles. That now you tend to see this all or nothing. You do what I want or I don't care about you. You do what I believe or I don't like you or I don't care about you. The answer is that's not realistic. There are plenty of my neighbors whose politics I do not agree with, and yet I would help them. Do I want to bring them home? No. But if they were running down the street with their hair on fire, I'd certainly help them. I wouldn't just say, well, you don't agree with me, so you can just burn. Now, this is also a matter of your personal values. That there are people I've met who just say, that's a bad person and they should die. And I typically don't agree with that. It takes a pretty serious thing to make me think maybe a person needs to die or be executed or whatever. So, you do have this overlap with what do you think constitutes major crime and what not? One of the really interesting moments of this whole Trump era has been this issue of where do you say your politics are so different than mine that I wish you ill. And you can really see it going crazy when you get to things like some jerk breaking into Nancy Pelosi's house to kill her. I mean, that's ridiculous. That what can a person do in politics in her situation that you literally believe you have the right to execute her? You know, and apparently their values, person who was doing that, his values were very different than mine. So, you know, again, this is not clear cut. This is the sort of intersection of your own personal values and your system of fairness, and also your system of people being close to you, and then gradually having a system where people are at different levels of unity or bonding or attachment with you. So going back to what I started with, please keep in mind when you're going to confront somebody, or confront, I know everybody's hearing that as more negative than it is. When you're going to talk to somebody about something you may have to persuade them of, or they may be unaware of and they're not sure if they want it, you also have to think about where they are in relationship to you. And it's not simply I like you, I hate you. It's, well, I want to preserve our relationship. And you have to sort of determine what is your level of that relationship. So when you're rehearsing, talking to somebody about something you want them to know or you want them to agree to, before you start it, while you're rehearsing what you're going to say, keep in mind the level that you are holding that person at. And keep in mind, if they don't agree with you, you're going to try to come out of the discussion with that same level. This is why, as a lifelong Italian girl, I don't believe in emotional cutoff of family members. Even when they're really toxic, I believe they're still your family, but they're very much on your outer level. You're keeping an eye on them. If they were desperate, you'd help them. You assume they have people closer to them because they're distant from you. But again, this is a very negotiable thing. This is a very personal thing. I'm not advocating for my point of view on this. I'm just saying you do need to keep in mind where your values are and what your levels are. Okay, so if you're going to get into a discussion with somebody, you can't go into every discussion believing it's all or nothing. That's in cog-B therapy, that's black and white or all and nothing thinking, where it's extreme. That instead of black and white, most of the world is gray. And total black thinking, total white thinking is not the ideal in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the middle ground we're always looking for. Okay, and that's true when you're going into confrontation of any sort, no matter how minor or how strong. You have to think about what you want the end picture between you and that other person to look like. This is very important because on the ACT model, what I'm talking about are your personal values. I'm talking about your committed action, your ability to talk to somebody to get what you need, but also diffusion. I'm talking about you don't want to be rigid. You want to be flexible because you're remembering who this person is to you because of your values. And you're also talking about acceptance. I can tolerate them for who they are. And you're talking about yourself in context. At this moment, it may work one way. Later in my life, this has to be flexible to change as all our situations change. So what I'm really saying is when you go into an interpersonal discussion that you expect you're going to be requesting something or trying to persuade somebody, you need to, number one, choose your battles based on the team, based on your overall picture of yourself in relationship with this person and your role in the relationship going forward after this discussion, what that might be. And you have to remember, in many cases, you're on a team. So, for example, if this is your spouse and you disrupt your relationship with him, in my case, then what's the effect going to be on your whole family? How are you going to explain it to the kids? What are the kids going to learn from it? What are they going to notice? Remember your team. Remember your role going forward and choose what you're doing. Rehearse it. Okay. In the fluffy books, nothing much there. I'm still swimming around in the things that I was swimming around in last week. I think in the Jane Austen's Dragon series, I read through the Persuasion, I think it's 2 books. Those were great. Way better than the Pride and Prejudice books, but you do need to read the P&P trio to get the Persuasion ones. I like the way she brings Anne Elliot into the series, and she really, Elizabeth is kind of her hero, but the writer is Anne Elliot. She really does a lot through Anne's perspective, and I'm enjoying that a lot. And it's just fun. And meanwhile, I have not even touched the Intro to Cultural Anthropology. I really want to. And I'm sort of trapped in a Beatrice Hyde Clare because I just got sucked into the Jane Austen's Dragons. I'll go back because I like Beatrice Hyde Clare, but they do get a little bit slow for me at times. They're just fun. I don't mean anything against them, and I do recommend them. Something I really like, well, I would have to say that it's probably the keto diet, and I'll talk about that more in the blather, but I had a really amazing experience with my keto diet. And I just want to point out, I'm coming up on 5 years in April of being, well, I was diagnosed with diabetes 5 years this coming April, and I think I went keto somewhere in like June. But I'm going to talk about that later. The other thing is I don't like to, be this all or nothing thinking about keto. So when I say something I really like is my keto diet, I just found out today how much I really owe it. And it's a lot. It's a huge amount. And so again, but when I talk about it, I don't want to be preaching it like, if you're not on a keto diet, you're not with Dr. Gemma. You're not doing what Dr. Gemma believes in. What I would say is the positive effects of about 4.5 years, slightly over, on a low-carb, high-fat diet are coming home to roost. And what I learned today, it's a very gradual path. To this day, I'm still making choices and realizing I have to rule things out, but also sometimes that I can rule some things in. And I'm still experiencing changes in my body based on this. The important thing, when I got on it, I was 225 pounds. I went down to about 156 pounds. Currently, I'm riding at 180, and that's more about the quarantine, and I stopped running, and, I will work on that. My doctor is over the moon happy with me at 180 because it's still 45 pounds lighter than when I became diabetic, and it's not that strange a weight for someone my age and my height. But I really need to get back to some workout. Everybody's famous last words. Working from home has actually interfered with my workout schedule, and that's part of it. So I'm sort of mulling all that over. But I have to tell you, 4.5 years on a keto diet has really helped me. And when I talk about it as something I really like, one thing I've heard from doctors, they say, well, we're all doing it. But they'll say things like, well, we do it for a month to drop weight fast, and then we go back on a regular diet. And that's fine. They don't have diabetes. They're not me. But what is implied in that is you shouldn't stay on it too long. And to this day, first of all, I know a lot of doctors who believe in it. Virtually every doctor I've ever met has been on it and does like it, but they just don't stay on it. And to this day, I've never heard anybody give a good explanation of why you can't be low carb. The AMA keeps coming out with these really bizarre, confused statements like, well, you shouldn't eat all these foods, but you shouldn't be ultra low carb, but they never define that. I have to tell you, there are plenty of times to be ultra low carb, including type 2 diabetes. I don't want to touch type 1. I don't know enough about that. And type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes should not even be using the same name because they're completely different diseases. They only got hooked together because both of them result in sweet-smelling urine, which was noticed in the Middle Ages in Western Europe. And that's how they got hooked together. They're not the same. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, something I really like, I have to say, I'm going through this wave of gratitude that the keto diet in 4.5 years has made so many positive changes in my life. It's kind of unreal. And another one just came home. But let's go on to put a lid on it. And again, please don't hear me as pressuring you to go keto. If you're type 2 diabetes, I'm here to say it worked for me. Put a lid on it. The tea tastings continue. I don't know what this is about mixing chocolate in tea, because Harney and Sons ain't succeeding with it. And I just tried Plum Deluxe Chocolate Mint Oolong. They sent me a sample. So you can see a little picture of the little sample bag. And it's chocolate mint like the cookie oolong tea. No, it ain't. It ain't. I don't know if my palate is just hypersensitive or what. The chocolate mint comes through and the flavor is good. But oolong to me is too floral to go with it. And so it's like this weird combination. It just doesn't taste quite right to me. Someone wrote to me and said, no, I love the Plum Deluxe Chocolate Mint Oolong. Yeah, I love Plum Deluxe because, again, while I'm drinking a lot of Harney and Sons, I'm not happy because I do believe they're soaking leaves in sugar. And in the end, I think that's going to steer me away from them, except in the category of, I like their chocolate mint black tea. I think chocolate mint stands up against a black tea, but not a black tea as light as oolong. What do I think they're blending it with? They're not saying. It doesn't taste like Darjeeling to me. Darjeeling tastes like earwax, and I think Darjeeling would drown out the chocolate mint flavors. I think maybe not the mint, because the mint's pretty intense. So, the chocolate mint loose tea of Harney and Sons is becoming a house tea for us. I'm not sure if I can't get a straight answer on it having sugar in it, it might not be. And there's a few other options in Plum Deluxe. I like Plum Deluxe. I like them better as a company. I'm just going to say it up front, because they guarantee they're not mixing sugar in any way. And Harney and Sons just won't. They're being very coy. So, thumbs down on Plum Deluxe Chocolate Mint Oolong for me. I just think oolong is a very light floral flavor. I may need to drink it as a straight up oolong. Oh, no, that's not true. The eggnog oolong from Plum Deluxe is insanely delicious. That works together really well. But I just think you can't put really strong flavors like a menthol flavor and a chocolate flavor against something as light and floral as oolong. So that's a sad thumbs down. To make myself feel better, I put in a picture of my spice cake. That is my pumpkin spice cake with chocolate chips sitting in unwhipped, heavy cream or double cream. And that's the British habit I picked up of just pouring liquid cream, over desserts, and nothing tastes better. Forget whipped cream, man. It's way better when you don't whip it. And you can see the keto chips sticking up on that. The funny story about that, my husband is now following me around, begging me to make more because somehow extra cans of pumpkin miraculously turned up in our pantry, just saying. So we're getting a lot of those, and it's great. I'm going to see if I can buy canned pumpkin at the regular grocery store. Pretty hard to get outside the fall season, but I do think before the winter ends, I'm going to throw myself at the grocery store. Trader Joe's, I can't find it anymore, but I'll throw myself at the grocery store and maybe Whole Foods and see if any of them are carrying pumpkin, preferably organic, because this one's a keeper. Alrighty, let's get on to the blather, shall we? So let me talk about that. I had a great day today. I went and I did my physical, my annual physical. That is saying something in itself. When you have type 2 diabetes, you don't get an annual physical. They want to see you every 3 months. If you're lucky, you get out to every 6 months. They put you on meds. They look at your A1C, blah, 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 blah. Last year, because I can't take a statin, I react to it. My doctor got mad at me and yelled at me and said, as a punishment, I'm not going to see you for a year. And I said, hallelujah. And she said, what? And she said, well, I'm not medicating you, so I'm not going to see you. And I said, that's great. And she looked a little bit shocked. And she strongly implied, sure, we'll give it a year. You will deteriorate. And then you'll be grateful to be seen and take these pills. So today was the physical. This was the year. What happened? I was even better. My mood was better. My weight was exactly the same as it was a year ago. I am not taking any meds. I'm feeling just fine. And she admitted, she said, I'm not even sure we should have type 2 diabetes on your diagnosis because she said, to be honest, I have never seen any evidence that you have sugar in the diabetic range. And I said, au contraire, Monsieur. And so she said, well, where did you get the idea you have diabetes? Like, I made this up. But I came back to them in 2019, and they picked up the diagnosis from my other records from a different insurance provider and a different medical team. So I told her the story. I said, in 2016, I told your doctor I had these problems. I was losing my vision, my night vision. I had a lot of pain. She said I had cancer. And I skipped the part where I said to that doctor, no, I don't. I have diabetes and I have hypothyroidism. So anyway, she wouldn't hear me, sent me to all these oncology people who said, I don't know why your doctor thinks you have cancer. You don't have cancer. I never worried. I knew I didn't have cancer. It was good. It got them to notice that I have nodules on my thyroid. I got those biopsied, so we know I don't have thyroid cancer. Anyway, I switched insurance providers and went to a new doctor over at Kaiser. Right away, they said, you have hypothyroidism and type 2 diabetes. They were horrified when I told them about my experience with the other doctor. The doctor literally said, please tell me if there's any other medical diseases you think you may have that doctor missed. It was that funny. Okay, so as I told my doctor, I got diagnosed, and I immediately made radical changes to my diet and my behavior. She backed off. I know she had keto written on her face. And I said, I have stayed with them. I dropped 40. At first, I dropped 65 pounds, and I still have 45 pounds of them off. It's been almost 5 years. And she just looked at me, and basically she said, diabetics don't succeed like this. And I said, I know. But I'm also thinking, but you would cut off your right arm before you would admit that the keto diet worked and that I didn't need statins. I mean, every doctor has told me, you're going to have a heart attack if you don't take statins. It's going to happen in the next month or two. Yeah, it hasn't. Go look at the channel on YouTube, Low Carb Down Under, to hear doctors discuss this. And you'll get all the evidence I have, and I don't want to go into that. The point is, I'm highly allergic to statins. I mean, excruciating pain to the point where I became suicidal on them. And then when they tried a second one on me, I lost my memory from day to day. I couldn't remember what day of the week it was. These are well-documented side effects, and if I had a nickel for every doctor who told me this was my imagination and I didn't know my own experience, and my all-time favorite, you're just a coward about pain, I'd have a quarter. Had a whole bunch of doctors say this to me. And the other thing about it is, what I say back to them is, oh yeah? I don't know about pain? Get on your shoes. I'll race you at any marathon you can find. You and me. We'll go out, we'll do 26.2 at any speed you want. And at the end of that, when your shoes are full of some unknown liquid, which could be blood or pus or sweat or some combination, and you feel like you're dying, you tell me about how I can't take pain, because I'll be there at the finish line laughing at you. I have a very high tolerance for pain, and when I tell you I'm in pain, you need to listen. Yeah, that's right. I'm a psychologist. I self-advocate really good. Okay, so the interesting thing, finally, what I take away from this was she said, I don't need to see you for a year. You don't need any medication. What has changed in the last year? Well, for one thing, I look great to them now. That if you're in the pre-diabetic range and you stay there for a long time, there's been some change in what that might mean in the thinking of the medical establishment. And then she admitted, I've been pre-diabetic for a long time too. And I said, great, good for you. I'm happy for you. And she was really struggling. You could see her, like she wanted to say, like, how are you doing this? And she said, you're a psychologist, right? And I said, that's right. And I said, I teach people all day long how to change their behaviors to succeed. And she said, yeah. So what I came away with, to stop lecturing about this, it was a great visit. So, my conclusion was, how's that keto diet? How's that keto diet doing after 4.5 years with type 2 diabetes? When I got diabetes, they said, you'll have 5 good years, then we're going to start putting you on insulin, etc. No meds at all. In 4.5 years, no meds at all. And she kept saying that. She kept saying, you have no meds. You have no meds, and your A1C is exactly the same as mine. I had to literally tell her my history and the history of my A1C so that she would believe that I really do have type 2. Oh yeah, my blood pressure, perfectly adequate. My heartbeat, perfectly adequate. No evidence, no heart problems, no palpitations, no nothing. And the only thing she could say is, you're starting to get a little humpbacked. You have a little fat on your back under your scapula. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not cancer or anything dangerous. Do you want to take a spine x-ray? Do you want to take a spine x-ray to see if you're getting scoliosis? I said, I don't have scoliosis. I sit in a chair all day long and knit and see patients. I really need to get back into exercising. But, you can see my post for Instagram, which is, does a keto diet help type 2 diabetes? Well, after almost 5 years on it, my doc suggested today that we remove the diabetes diagnosis because she has never seen me with an abnormal A1C. And it was very funny in the midst of this. When you have diabetes, they always stick you with a pin really lightly. And they just want to see if you've lost sensitivity, because diabetics lose their sense of feeling in their toes and their hands. They often have their toes amputated because it's called necrosis. They die, etc. If you don't take care of your diabetes, not looking good. So anyway, she pulls out this needle, and I said, why don't you just stick me with that? Let's get that over with. Because I said, as I sit here talking to you, I can feel the threads in my hand-knitted sock against my toes in my shoe. I have perfectly good perception. And she's like, well, we have to do the test anyway. I said, yeah. Pulls the needle out, starts giving me this lecture. I looked at her, I said, for God's sake, will you stick that needle in me? And she looked surprised and started laughing. And she said, I was getting you used to the needle. I said, let me explain to you that exposure therapy is not working in this case. And she laughed and I laughed. And she stuck it under my jaw, I think I don't know why, to be honest. But I said, no, I feel that. And I jumped when she hit my feet. And she's like, wow, 5 years of diabetes. Wow. And I said, yes. So this is why I have to say, something I really love, and I really passionately love it, is my keto diet. And you say, oh, I couldn't do keto because I lost so many foods. Yeah, I got one word to say to you: bacon, chocolate chip cookies, brownies. These are some of the things I've eaten this week. Big salad, roast chicken. I mean, do I sound deprived? Steak. Please tell me when we get to the part where I'm not eating something you'd like to eat. Oh yeah, rice, potatoes, flour, and sugar. Wheat flour. I do use whole nut flours. Yeah. Does a loaf of fresh baked bread taste better than any kind of keto bread? Probably. Do I care that much? No, because while you're busy eating all the bacon you can snarf down, you kind of forget the bread a lot. Do I miss bagels? I miss bagels, cream cheese, and lox, sorta. But they're now keto replacements for the bagels, and cream cheese and lox, they're still there for me. All right, let me get on to ASL. This is not good. I had thought I want to take the 102 class. It's Monday and Wednesday evenings, starting at 5. Really stupid. I had thought, well, I can do it on Mondays, but I can't do it on Tuesdays. That's not going to work, missing half the classes. But I had a 4 p.m. patient on Monday and Wednesdays, on Wednesdays. And she's doing great. And I thought, she's going to cancel therapy. I'll drop her and I won't refill that space. I'll block it. And then I can go on Wednesdays down to the Santa Clarita Valley, and I could go to the home office and do my patients from there and then drive to class. Or maybe I could do half the day at home and then at lunch drive down, park in the office, do my last 2 patients and go to class. It ain't going to work. That 4 o'clock patient is really happy and doesn't want to leave yet. And I'm taking it as a sign from the universe. I can't tell you how much I hate that sign from the universe, but the universe dropped into my mailbox. The head of the department down at the College of the Canyons said, I'm teaching a class on deaf culture and you don't have to know ASL. Guess what I'm probably going to switch to? I'm going to give it till the 30th, and if that patient is not out of that space, I'm going to just say, and I know if I told her this is what I want to do, she would relocate or quit. Like, she's doing really well, but I don't think it's going to work. I don't think I can live with that schedule. So it looks like I'm probably going to switch into the deaf culture class. How I'm going to keep up with ASL, I don't know, but I am not going to lose it now. I also found out there is a program in California to teach senior citizens ASL. So this is really nice. And I'll bet most of the deaf teachers know about this program. And so I'm really happy about that, because that means they are motivated to teach me. I was a little concerned about that. Why would I teach you ASL? You're so old. Of course, old people are the ones who lose their hearing, but I'm just saying. Okay, the pup date. Well, Captain, we got her biopsy back. She does have lupus. So they gave us ointment to treat it, and then she has to go back in a month. And we'll talk about the pills and everything else. But, she's doing really well. A few people have written to me and said, my dog had lupus and we had to treat it carefully, but they lived 8 or 9 years after they were diagnosed. Eleanor didn't do well with it. The vet thought she was. What did she die of? We still don't know. She just went out like a candle, and I still haven't gotten any satisfying answer. So, I'm looking at Captain, and it's kind of like what I did with Minerva after she committed suicide by eating all that string. I just said, we really have to improve your quality of life and do the best we can by you. And hopefully we'll get another 9 or 10 years out of you. Queenie's doing great. Queenie is slowing down a little bit. She's beginning to get the idea that you can't tear around the house going crazy. And she's starting to work on being an indoor dog. The charming thing about the three of them, Blankets, Queenie, and Captain, is they all are very bonded to each other. So sometimes Captain will sit indoors and cry. She can't be outdoors too much because the sun is not good for her lupus. But she'll cry, and she's trying to tell me, my buddy's outside. I need to be with my buddy. Bring her in or put me out. Sometimes Blankets runs around the house crying when I haven't fed the other dogs. I'll feed her, and she'll still be telling me, no, you got to feed my puppies. So we have a very sweet trio here. Blankets, I cannot believe how old she is. We got her in, I think, 2009. So this summer will be 13 or 14 years. And I think she was about 2 when we got her. She's doing great. She occasionally loses her hindquarters. She'll get up and her hindquarters will slip on the hardwood floor. But we're all just happy and doing great. And yes, they're all very smart dogs. Blankets, it's very turned inward because of the abuse she received when she was young. But Captain is smart, but she's kind of nervous. Queenie is a rocket scientist and is terrifying in her problem-solving abilities. The hub state, he's doing just fine. We are just settled down for our long winter nap, as it were, trying to budget and pay bills and make things work. But things are going pretty well. We have to be kind of careful with the money, but we're doing okay. The calendar, Grand Canyon and Sunnybank are tentative, but they're there. Grand Canyon, we do have reservations for June 5th through 9th. It's not a long trip out from here, so I'm hoping it will be doable. Sunnybank will be in August if it's going to happen. Minerva gets the last word, and here we are in the depths of January. So I have a picture of her. She took one of my infinity scarves, one of the best ones, of course. It's Malabrigo. Threw it on the floor and is lying on it, and she's lying right in front of the air purifier on one side and the space heater on the other. And so Minerva's last word would be, everybody stay warm. And my last word would be, as you know, wear your masks, get your shots, socially distance, wash your hands, but most of all, remember your place on the world team here in the community. When we take care of others, we take care of ourselves. So everybody, please stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.